All right, so let's talk a little bit today about jig fishing, which is one of my favorite lures of all time. You know, I won the Bassmasters Classic, probably my biggest victory ever on a jig, and I've just had lots and lots of success with them over the years. And for some reason, you know, talking to my peers and the other pros out there, you know, it seems like jigs don't catch them like they used to. And I don't know that it's nothing to do with the jig. I think a lot of that has to do with some of the lakes we fish and all the pressure they get and the trend towards finesse in our sport and clear water, and a lot of the lakes don't have as much cover as they used to. But that's just kind of a general trend in our sport. But let me tell you, there's plenty of times when we run across good jig bites. And there's nothing I'd rather do, you know, than pick up my flipping stick and a jig and go to work. It's just a great big fish technique, and you know, it's probably one of my favorite ways to catch them, flipping a jig inside heavy cover. So I want to talk a little bit about jigs today, and we'll start off with the flipping jig, which is probably the one I fish the most. You know, flipping jig is mostly designed for fishing wood, grass cover, any type of boat docks, brush piles, all that stuff is good jig water. I like to, you know, I like to have the water a little bit dingy for a good, ideally for a good flipping bite. But there's been tons of times in clear water lakes that if you have cover, whether it be docks or brush piles or buckbrush or willow trees, anything like that, even if the water is gin clear, you can catch them with jigs. So you're not limited to stained water, but that would probably be the ideal situation. In my hand is a jig I designed for pure fishing, Berkeley, and it's the Yelas gripper jig. It comes in a package that looks about like this, and Berkeley actually has a football head jig and a finesse jig also. But for now we're going to talk about the flipping jigs. And this is a jig, it's a Yelas Signature Series flipping jig. It's got my name on it. I designed it. And we'll just go through some of the features of what I consider to be a good flipping jig. If you'll notice on this, the eye is compressed into the lead head, so that helps to make it real weedless. And it's got a big 5/0 mustad hook. You know, you want the eye of the hook to be much lower than the point of the hook. And then it just really helps to get a good hook set on the fish when it comes over the top of the mouth of a bass. And then you've got of course the eye is inside the lead head. It's got eyes on the bait. And then we've got the weed guard is a little softer than the old version of the jig, which is right here. But that weed guard is perfect for me. You don't want a weed guard to be too heavy because it'll impede your hook set. And then finally, when we flip it over, you've got this rattle that you can hear, and then you've got the little gripper barbs on the shank of the hook that help to hold your trailer, your plastic trailer up on the hook. I've got friends, pros, guides all over the country that absolutely love this jig. They're just, you know, they don't lose any fish on it. It's because of the hook design and the head design. The weed guard on this jig is a lot lighter than the original Yelas flipping jig that I designed for Berkeley. It's been out. That jig has been out since '02 when I won the Classic on it. So that jig kind of went away in '08, and this is our new one for '09. Is the gripper jig. This weed guard's lighter than that weed guard. That weed guard was actually a little too heavy. A lot of times I'd take my scissors and I'd trim some of that weed guard out. You don't need to do that at all with this weed guard. It's a lot lighter, and you can fish this jig through any type of cover. The one place you might come into trouble is if you're a newcomer to the sport and haven't fished a jig a lot, or like if you're out on a guide trip with a fishing guide and he's having you fish a jig and you don't have a good feel for the difference between a bite and cover, then you might set the hook a little prematurely, and you'll hang up a little bit more with this jig than an experienced angler would. But for the experience, this jig is designed for pros, and for weekend anglers that really know what they're doing. I mean, it's a great tool in the hands of someone that knows how to fish a jig. The weed guard's perfect for me and for most people that are serious jig fishermen. Got a good loud rattle on the back, and on the shank of the hook we've got these little gripper barbs, hence the name gripper jig. It just helps to hold your trailer up on the jig. So that's basically it. Black and blue is probably the #1 color, you know, year-round, nationwide. One of my other favorites is pumpkin green chartreuse, which you've got here. It's pumpkin with green flake, a little bit of black, a little chartreuse, and then you've got the classic craws, another one of my favorites. It's kind of a black and brown and pumpkin color. Those are the 3 jigs that I fish the most, you know. Basically a black jig, a brown kind of mottled with a little black jig, and then a pumpkin green chartreuse. Those are my 3 best colors for jig fishing, and that's a good flipping jig lineup right there. So that's just about it for flipping jigs. You know, I've covered a lot of the details of the jig and why I like this jig and some of the benefits of it. And if you'll stay tuned for the next episode, I'm going to talk about the other jigs in my lineup, in my arsenal that I use, the football head jig and the finesse jig.